Hey guys, welcome back to a different part of the video. Here I have some progress. These are all four calipers. As you can see, these are the two fronts and those are the two rear. And can you notice which one looks different? There are the two rears. Obviously these are different calipers in the fronts, but let's take a look at this one right here. What do you think compared side by side here? I've cleaned these numerous times with wheel cleaner and brake cleaner, and this is the cleanest I could get them. Man, there is some deep caked in stuff, especially on these brackets. And then as you can see, the actual caliper body here, this is a little bit corroded. You know, more places than others. You can really see right there, it's pretty dull. It has a little bit of, looks like it's original coating on there. But, you know, this caliper is from 1994. This is original to the car. So this is pretty old. These calipers are looking like they need a refresh. So what I've done so far with this caliper right here in this bracket is I have used my drill. These are just wire wheels. You know, I bought a pack off of Amazon that have these different shapes and sizes. So that's pretty much what that looks like. You know, you basically just, you know, sand it and wire wheel it with that. This is, you know, just going over it once. One place I couldn't get to on this bracket is in here, although I did take a wire brush, just kind of went over it. So I'm not too concerned with this area anyways, but that's what I did. And the other parts look great. They are looking pretty fresh. It's coming up pretty good. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my mask back on, and I am wearing my glasses. So you definitely want to be wearing a, you know, respirator and some at least safety glasses or whatever glasses while you are doing this job. So I'm going to get back to it. Alright guys, I just got done cleaning up the calipers. As you can see, they are on a Huggies box, naturally. Dad life. Alright, so I just went over these with a microfiber cloth and this stuff right here. This is what I use before I paint things. This is Duplicolor. It's a cleaner, grease and wax remover. So any grease and wax remover will do, but I just went over with it, like I said, like a microfiber cloth, just to get all of the dust that was, you know, broken off and all the little tiny metal shavings and everything like that. Basically just the sanding dust from the wire wheels. I was just cleaning that up. Plus you want to do that anyways, you know, before you paint something, just to make sure that all of, you know, if there's any grease on them or anything like that, that it will be cleaned off before paint. I'm going with the silver. This is like called cast aluminum, which is exactly pretty much how they are now. But you know, of course, this is going to provide a protective layer on there. And you know, I didn't really want to go red or, you know, blue or anything on this car. I kind of just want to keep it, for the most part, looking OEM, at least in this, you know, for the brakes. I don't really want flashy calipers on this, so I just decided just to go with a aluminum paint. I think that'll look nice. And anyways, I was also going to say that, as you can see, I have all the seals, the rubber boots and stuff like that here for the here are the front calipers, and these are for the rear calipers. I ordered actually an OEM kit, a Honda OEM kit, online. Just for reference, I did look up these front pistons, and these are discontinued. I believe that the rear ones are still in production, and they cost, I believe, around 60, or maybe it was like $66 each, something like that, 60 something bucks. So I won't be buying any new cylinders. I think that these are perfectly okay. There's no pitting, you know, there's no rough edges or anything on these. These are, you know, they may be discolored a little bit, but they are smooth, and that's what matters. So I'm keeping the old pistons. So yeah, that's what I got going on. Looks like my next step is to put tape over all the holes and openings. I don't want, you know, paint getting in there. I don't want any paint getting inside of that piston there. No need. I'm just gonna put a tape on this lip. But yeah, it's coming along nice. Alright guys, here we have the front caliper off of my 1994 Integra GSR. And we are going to be rebuilding the front caliper, well actually all calipers today. And we're going to start with this front caliper. Here is the rebuild kit part number. This is the Honda OEM rebuild part number right there. This is what comes in the bag. A couple of washers for the brake lines, some new boots that go over the slide pins, the seal on the caliper, the inner seal for the caliper, and a couple of greases. So what we're going to do first is, the front ones are very simple. So we're just going to take this seal right here, we're going to lube it up with some brake fluid, and then just put it in this inner rim right inside the brake caliper. Just going to dab a little bit of brake fluid on this seal just to give it some lubrication to go in there. Alright, so we're just going to fit this seal right in the inner part here. There we go. Fit right in there. Nice. Alright guys, you can see that the seal is in there. Lines up very nice. Alright, so here's our piston. It is not scorn or doesn't have any pitting or anything to it. It does have some minor discoloration, which is okay. It's in pretty good shape, so we are going to reuse this piston. If your piston has some pitting on it, or some pretty heavy scoring on it, then I would definitely recommend a new piston, but mine are okay. So a little dirty, but that's all right. Just a very light coat. I just dabbed my finger in a little bit of brake fluid and then just very lightly, evenly putting it all around the piston. So that'll be good right there. Now let's lube up the seal here. Just gonna, same process. Let's see. Okay, very good. Now we are going to, let's see, we want the piston to go on this direction. So I'm just gonna put it over the piston. Of course it is slippery now, so this is a little bit more difficult. Okay, now that we have the seal on the piston, it is latched in its little channel there, so we are going to bring it down, bring it all the way down to where this lip at the very end. This part right here is going to go in the little channel that is inside the caliper. So we're just going to bring this to the very end, try to get it as even as possible on there, and then we're going to set it in there and try to get that seal seated to the caliper. This may take quite a few tries to get it in there, but just try to be patient. You may have to use like a small tool to try to get it seated in there properly. Alright guys, so once you get that seated in there, you can see that the piston is just kind of floating there. I just kind of pushed my finger all the way around, made sure that it was completely seated, lifted this up a little bit, and just kind of took a peek all the way around just to make sure that that seal is in the lip of the caliper. Just kind of do that all the way around, and you can see it's just kind of floating around, and it is completely seated in there. So after you do that, you want to push this piston in to the caliper. Alright guys, so this is what a nice, well-seated seal looks like against the piston and the caliper. It's looking great. Alright guys, now that we have done the fronts, we are now ready to do the rear calipers. I'm here with my helper, and right here we have my Integra's rear caliper. Alright guys, it's pretty hard to see down there in the caliper, but there is a tiny little circlip in there that we must undo to take out the components of the caliper to rebuild it. Now this is the tool that I'm going to be using. These are channel locks number 927. Alright guys, what actually worked better than those pliers is just a pick. This is the type of pick that I used. it came out actually very, very simply. It only took me like 2 tries and I got it, and it didn't ricochet out. Let's see here. Let's see if I can get this out without it, you know, going across the room. Yeah, it looks like I'm gonna get it out here. There we go. All right. Okay, so here is that circlip. We're just gonna set that right there. And then what's next is the little hat that goes on top of the spring. Also notice that the spring, the smaller end, like the smaller diameter end, goes on the inside. So the larger one, it's almost like a, you know, it's like a cone. Well, let's put these out in order that they came out. So that and that. And then let's see if we can get this other stuff out here. Just gonna kind of shake it off, and then a washer comes off, and then this little, it's almost like a little bearing. So we're gonna put that on. Okay, so next, then this came out. All I did, you just saw me just kind of wiggle this out. Yours may not come out that easy. All right guys, so you can see that down in there. That is what is left. It's very difficult to get that out. It's not really coming out with kind of turning the caliper upside down, maybe stuck in there a little bit. So I'm gonna try to get like my pick here and just trying to move that against the wall of the inside of it and just kind of try to work it out. All right guys, we got this piece out right here. This is it. This part right here is what that part of the screw rests in. And then on the other side, on this end, there is this little piece like this, which has grease all over it, which was resting in there like that. So that's how that was in there. Oh, and by the way, before we move on, in order to get this out, this piece right here that I just showed you, I first tried with using a 90-degree pick. I got into the edges and I just tried to kind of like pry it out. That didn't work. So then I got this glove right here and I turned my caliper and I just hit it on it a few times and then it came out. So that's how mine ended up coming out. I think it depends on how, you know, corroded or how rusted your caliper is, but that's the way I got it out. So now we can proceed with taking off this rubber boot right here. By the way, I do have a rebuild kit for these rear calipers. There it is, guys. That's the part number, and this is what comes with it. We have a couple washers for the brake lines. We have a new boot for the piston. This seal right here goes right there, and then a new O-ring gasket for inside the caliper and the ring. And by the way, I'll show you all this whenever I install it. Another O-ring, and then this little O-ring type 1 goes on the end of this screw right there. So we will replace all this stuff, but let's continue on with the disassembly of this caliper. So now I'm going to take my pick right here. I'm going to pick off this boot right here, and like I said, I do have a new one, so I do not care if I happen to tear or destroy this. Whoa, okay, so that just came out as one. Looky there.
Yeah, lucky you.
All right, so we'll get this seal off. We'll set that to the side. Oh, and then by the way, this rebuild kit came with new greases as well. All right, so let's see. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and clean up in here. I'm gonna clean up all this grease, and then we can start rebuilding this this caliper with all the new parts. All right, guys, so this has to do with the emergency brake. This pin looks like it already has some orange grease on there, so I'm gonna go ahead and clean it off, and then we will replace it with the Honda OEM orange grease supplied in my rebuild kit. So we're gonna clean this up, make sure there's no like scoring or, you know, corrosion or anything on this. So far it's looking pretty clean, so I'm gonna give this a good wipe down, then we can re-grease it and put this back in. All right, guys, so now I have all the brake parts all cleaned and ready to be reassembled. So this is the parking lever here, This has to do with the parking brake. So now in order to reinstall this, oh, and by the way, I cleaned out all in here and inside the caliper. Like I said, mine wasn't too dirty, so I just took a shop rag and just kind of wiped it down a few times. But now we are ready to re-grease. So I'm just going to put a very light greasing on this right here and a little bit inside there, and then we can just plop that back in, and then we can put the seal back on for that one. All right, let's just slide that in there like that. There we go, nice and lubed up. Now I'm going to take our new seal, Honda OEM, of course, the only type of parts I use whenever they're available, of course. All right, so now we're just gonna slip that in, and we'll work that seal back in its place. All right, so I find it easier if you put in the seal first. It has a lip in there right on the caliper that this will just slip into, just like that. So now that is in place. So now we can take our emergency lever here, and we are just going to push that through just like that. It is already lubed up with grease, so that's good. And there it is. It is installed. We will wipe that excess grease off, and we can move on to the next part. All right, guys, let's go ahead and replace some seals. As you can see, or some O-rings, there is an O-ring on this piece right here. Just going to get my pick and try to get that off, and then we can replace it with a new O-ring. Got it. Okay, there we go. We'll just take that off like that, and we'll set the old one to the side. Here is the brand new one. Honda OEM, of course. All right, let's put that on there. There we go. Nice new O-ring. Now, the other seal that we have is on this guy right here. Let's see, this is sitting... So this O-ring is, or this is a little bit different because this one has kind of like a slit in it. It's a little hard to see on camera, but one end is kind of open and then one end is flat. All right, guys, so we are taking out this O-ring just like that. As you can see, the solid end of this seal right here goes on the top, which I would consider that right there. And then the slit, let's turn this one over. See the slit right there? That goes towards the big bottom end, so it's going to go in like that. There's the bottom, goes like that. So I'm just going to move that over. Just kind of put it on there. Let me set this old seal down so don't get them confused. And then we will just work this seal, try to get it evenly on there, just like that. There we go. There is the new seal on that one. Okay, 2 seals changed. Awesome. Now I am going to grease the inside of this part right there, and then also the inside of it right there. I'm just going to use this orange grease that was provided and fill those up. All right, guys, to install this next portion, you can see that I have that little bearing inside where the emergency brake is, that emergency brake little rod down there. I have it opened where it is accepting of this little rod right here, of that little rod right there. So what I'm going to do is as I said, I already have these greased up on both ends. It's greased on that end and it's greased there. So I'm going to do is I am going to hold the caliper upside down like this. I'm going to feed this in there like that. All right, guys, I finally got that piece in there. You do have to make sure that it seats all the way in there. There are 2 little like prongs hanging out that need to be seated. So just make sure that it goes all the way in. So next, let's go ahead and put in this screw right here. I am going to put a little bit of grease on this end. Again, just some orange grease that was provided in the kit. So I'll just lube this up, and then we can put this in. This little bearing here, that goes on top. And then this little washer, we'll put that on top of that. Make sure those go right on top of each other, just like that. And then we can turn the caliper over and then just stick this in right in its place down there. Make sure you just kind of push it in there. Yep, there it goes, just like that. It actually has a little bit of a springy action in there, so that's good. And then our spring, remember the smaller side in first, so that will go in like that. Then our spring cover, this thing like that, we'll put that in there. Try to make sure that this stuff is pretty evenly seated in there as well. So now that we have all of that, now we can go ahead and put the, actually before I put in the remaining stuff, I'm actually going to put in this seal right here, this little O-ring. So this O-ring goes in, it's seated inside, it has a lip inside the caliper. All right guys, you can see I actually took out all of these right here because it's actually easier to install this with all that stuff out. So as you can see, there is just an O-ring, just kind of feed it in there. It's very easy to get into its groove. So now that is all seated and nice and new. All right, now I'm just gonna set all this back, all this stuff right here back in there. All right guys, here is all of that put together. It all looks nice and clean. All right guys, now it's time to put in the C-clip. There are a few ways you can go about doing this. I'm just gonna set this in. There are, I believe, a 17mm socket will fit this. So try to get it in there evenly, and then you can get a socket and then just push it down there evenly until it is in its groove. All right guys, now that we have the C-clip nicely in its place and everything is good to go in there, before we move on, let's turn our attention to the cylinder. Now, there's nothing really to replace in here. You can get yourself a new cylinder if you have any like scoring or any like pitted, if you have a pitted wheel cylinder, then you might want to get a new one. Mine is not bad. It actually looks pretty good, so I will not be replacing this. And there are no O-rings or anything to replace inside this wheel cylinder, but just for the sake of it, I'm just going to take the, I believe it's like 4 parts inside here. I'm just going to take it out just to clean it, and then I will reassemble it. So this does have another circlip in there, so I'm going to undo that and then take this apart, clean it up real quick, put it back together, and then we can continue on with rebuilding this caliper. You have your glasses? Good. Oops. Yeah, thank you, sir. Ooh, did you see how that came out really quickly, man?
That's why you have safety glasses on.
Yep.
Kind of clean.
Okay, so look, here's a washer.
Yep.
There's that. All right, this is not actually really dirty hardly at all. But we will just
wipe it down.
Yeah, we're just gonna wipe it down. Maybe add a little bit more grease in there. Just gonna, yep. Just gonna wipe all this down in there. Just clean everything off.
Are we gonna put brake fluid in it?
No, we're not gonna put brake fluid in it. We're just gonna clean all this stuff up, and we will put a little bit of grease at the end of this, but for now we're just gonna clean it up.
I have the pointy end of the ruler at the bottom of the thing because it won't poke anyone whenever we take it out.
All right, we have a little bit of grease in there, a little bit of grease on this. We're just gonna set that in there, just like that. And then the spring goes on it, and then this little washer will go on top. And then, all right, now we have this all cleaned. By the way, a tip to get that circlip seated in there is just use a 17mm socket, and then you can either push it or hit it gently in there, and then that will seat all of that. this little ridge part right here, that is going to fit nicely inside the groove in the caliper. This groove right in there, it's going to fit nicely in there, and then we can slowly screw in the piston. Alright guys, so I'm actually going to take some brake fluid and I'm going to lube this up with some brake fluid and then put the seal on and put a little bit of brake fluid on this rim of this seal right here to help hopefully give it some lubrication to make it a little bit easier to put it back in the caliper. Okay, once you have that seal seated, and by the way, you can kind of get a screwdriver and just kind of peel up a little bit of the seal and just confirm that it is seated all the way around. You definitely want to make sure that it is seated all the way around. Then you want to start screwing your piston on. You can do that with a large screwdriver or a specialty tool. There we go. It is all nice and seated. Alright guys, now that we got this caliper seated all the way in, or this piston seated all the way in, now we can move on to replacing this old, worn out bleeder valve. Here is the OEM part number for the Integra GSR. I'm sure these are probably the same throughout all the Honda calipers, but I got myself a brand new, nice and shiny bleeder valve. Man, that's going to be nice. Go ahead and get my flare nut wrench. Let's take this off and replace it with some OEM goodies, of course, because here at Spencer's Garage, we like to do things right. And to do things right, you got to use OEM parts. All right. It's off. Let's compare the old versus the new. See.
The new definitely looks more shiny. Have you ever replaced the bleeder valves of this thing?
Not on my Integra. I just did on my 91 Civic, but never have on this Integra. So look at that. Nice and shiny bleeder valve. Man,
We're almost done.
We're almost done. Alright guys, we got all of our calipers rebuilt. I'm just going to make this video about rebuilding the calipers. I'm not going to make, I'm not going to make a install video on these. So I guess that concludes this video. The end products are looking so fresh and so clean. There's the fronts. There's the rear. They are ready to go. So thank you guys so much for watching, and be sure to tune in for more videos on my 1994 Integra GSR.